Hey folks, Quilly here, and welcome to a Post Mortem for Tub of War. Tub of War is a game I made in 48 hours for the Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare Game Programming Jam. This is a competition where you have 48 hours to make a game. The theme is announced on Friday at 9 p.m. and you'll have until Sunday at 9 p.m. to complete a game. There's also, that's the compo. There's also a jam variant which is longer and allows teams and pre-existing assets. But I do the compo, which is 48 hours solo with no pre-existing assets whatsoever. I had to make all textures, 3D models, music, and all the code from scratch in that 48 hours. I live streamed the whole thing over the course of the weekend, and we had a ball. The theme was a small world. And while many people made games that involved literal small planets that you had to walk around in, I instead took a slightly different interpretation where I made a game about playing with toys in a bathtub. Because a bathtub is small, the toys are small, it's a small world. And it actually got me to finally do a game using assets that looked very sort of like kids friendly. It's something I've actually been wanting to do for a while. This is still not a kids game, which is something I'm hoping to do at some point, because the controls are going to be too complicated. It's sort of a twin stick shooter kind of thing in the end kind of controls. And but one day I want to make a game that I think my little nieces and nephews would have fun playing. And I think this is just maybe a little too much for them, although maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. We'll have to see. Next time there's a family gathering, I will have to break out this game. But the visuals are, this is by far I've got some of the strongest visuals of any game that I've put together. I'm going to go ahead and play one session here, and then we're going to talk about how I made this. Well, there's a surprising amount of code files actually in here. How I made this, what went right, what went wrong, that sort of thing. But first, we're going to have to play a game. I have to note, this game is quite tough, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. I myself will be very lucky if in this demonstration I break 2 digits of our goal, which is rescuing toys, where if people have tweeted me, I think the record tweet is something at about 38 rescued toys, which is crazy. Anyway, very simple little menu screen over here. Although I do like that, where the you've got the critters going by, making noises and things like that. You've got a slight little instructions about things, and then you get into the game over here. I gotta admit, my graphic design skills for the menu were not fantastic, but I think the look of the game is pretty good. So, this is, again, sort of a twin-stick shooter game. You use WASD to steer your vessel, and then you can use your mouse to shoot. You can use your left click to cast out a little line here to grab people and rescue them there. And every now and again, some enemies spawn. Ooh, that'll be quite good. A big bath bomb, kill a whole bunch of people. Let's grab the Mega Cannon upgrade. That's going to be... Oh, we got another bath bomb over there. Let's grab this fellow over here and tug him back over to the rescue area to rescue. You start with a... Bath time is nearly over. You only have a minute and a half to play at the start, but... Ooh, that hurt. But for every toy that you rescue, you get an extra 10 seconds added, and there are power-ups. I think there's 8 different power-ups that I ended up making. One of them gives you a 15-second bonus as well. So it is possible to play for an extended period of time. Meanwhile, there are some enemies that keep spawning. You can't shoot the rescue toys, so that's good. Let me go and grab you over here, the spread shot. I'm going to grab you over here. Now, you can push and shove. There's my spread shot upgrade. The people around. Oh, if I get really good here, I can kite a couple. Bam, like that. Excellent. You can push and shove the people, and your... Oh, it's the Quackin'! I really need a weapon upgrade, especially if I have no ammo. I don't think I've got one kicking around. What do you got here? Oh, this bomb, bath bomb will help. I don't know if he's dead. Oh, he is dead. Okay, good. The bullets, when they hit the water, they actually do cause a little bit of an explosion that can be used to push the people. Originally, I just had the ability to push people by, like, literally pushing around with your ship, as well as the shot, the explosion of your bullet hitting the water, and using that to... Come on, you can do it. There we go. To push the people around. And that was interesting and fine, but a little cumbersome, and it proved to be not entirely fun, and so put in the hook. The hook was always something on the list of, like, maybes to do, but I want to give the game a chance to be played without the hook for as long as possible during development, and then I would decide if that proved to be, you know, the way to go or not. Oh, time's almost not up. We only got 30 seconds left. Let's drop you in here. That'll give us a little bit more time. Bop you. Bop. There's some extra time. I really need... Okay, the extra cannon will be good. It does a lot more damage. I'm almost out of hit points. Ah! 9 toys rescued over here. But yeah, I was saying that the hook we eventually... I think that's what I was saying. Eventually decided to go ahead and put in the hook, and it proved to be a lot less annoying to rescue the people. It meant that I didn't have to change some other aspects of game balance, right? Because if it was hard to rescue people, then we would have had to make other parts of the game a little bit easier. Okay, we got a super sub here, which has got heat-sinking missiles, which you can shoot down, and the sub itself takes 3 shots to hit. And actually, the torpedoes can end up tanking for it a little bit. There's a health thing. So you'll notice there's no health bar on the screen. Actually, no, that's not true. We did add one at the end, so you've got 7 hit points here. But at first, the visual hit points are actually these tires here. Every time you take damage, the tire the closest to the damage falls off. When we have no more tires left, if you get hit one more time, you do die. I did end up putting the HP meter there because a lot of people were saying, oh, it's weird that there's no HP meter. It wasn't necessarily... Not everyone gets that the tires are your life meter. So it's like, okay, that's fine. We can put the 2 levels. But because these objects here are always physics enabled, it allows... a slightly emergent kind of gameplay to happen where you can rescue these people in pairs or something like that if you can juggle them. There we go. Let's bring... Oh, the Kraken is around. Can I get a power-up here? That's the magnet power-up, which isn't exactly what I'm looking for. So shit. I'm taking too much damage. You can shoot down these missiles as well. The Kraken's going to take something like 10 shots to kill, which is why I'm mostly on the lookout for a power-up. There we go. Spread shot will help a lot. For 2 reasons. One, the 2 shots on the side do actually have infinite range. Well, what am I saying? Your main shot is kind of ballistic. It'll hit wherever you shoot. You can see it lands in the water there. It's got a nice little wave effect. Whereas the extra 2 shots from the spread shot don't do that. They just go as far as possible and eventually impact the walls of the tub. Which means with the spread shot, you can shoot people off screen. But also, if you get close to the Quacken, then you can shotgun him for a lot of extra damage. Super Cannon is good, does triple damage. There's a little healing thing. There we go, the Metalloduck. Ooh, let's pick up the Survivor Magnet here. And you know what, we'll trigger the Bath Bomb as well. Kill everyone. Bath Bomb does, I think, 5 damage technically. So it doesn't kill everything. In particular, it does not kill the Quacken in one shot. But we'll take off quite a bit of its hit points. As you play, the spawn rate of the enemies increases. The spawn rate of the Quacken never increases, but it does spawn with more and more hit points. Let's grab the auto fire before it despawns. Nope. Out of ammo. I'm still invulnerable, though, and then blow up everyone, and that's good. You may have noticed there's a slight thing. If you do pick up a heal... Oh, and everything stacks, by the way. So I've got the spread shots and the super cannons. If you pick up a health thing, which replaces a tire, while you're invulnerable, it does not get colored golden. And I knew about the bug, and I decided not to fix it in the interest of time, because it required sort of rewriting a little bit of my... it would have required rewriting a handful of... my code, and I didn't want to go through and debug it, basically. Like, when you get near the end of the competition, you have to make decisions about where to spend your time. And if you're making late changes to systems that might be slightly complex or slightly prone to horrible, like, accidents happening, then you really... Oh no! We're out of time! Ah! So when you run out of time, a whirlpool opens up at the bottom of the tank. Technically, you can sort of maybe fight it for a little. And if for somehow you pick up a power-up for some extra time, you can actually get the whirlpool to maybe turn off. But eventually the whirlpool does pull you in. We're getting to delay a little bit because we're bouncing off some things, but there you go. I've hit the middle of the whirlpool, at which point it will actually time you out properly. So we only saved 8 over there. That's too bad. Okay, so let's talk about the game. So yeah, so the concept came together pretty well. I actually had quite a few ideas written down for this particular thing, including maybe revisiting a card game, maybe revisiting certain 4X kind of concepts, making a strategy game. But I sort of got in my head pretty early about doing this, even though it is outside of what I would consider sort of my niche of games, right? Which is playing strategy games and honestly making strategy games as well. But I like to alternate what games I make from time to time, and we hadn't done sort of a more action-y game, really, in a bit. And this, I thought, had a lot of promise. And what was interesting is right away some people were like, oh, you shouldn't do it in 3D. You should just play it safe and do it in 2D. But the fact of the matter is, there are certain 3D things that I'm quite good at doing quite quickly. Childhood toys are actually very simple models. They tend to be anything that's made out of like molded plastic, right? This is like a couple of pieces of molded plastic put together here, another piece of molded plastic on top. Like if you were to do this in real life, anything like that can actually be modeled pretty quickly. One of the most time-consuming and difficult things in 3D is to do is the texturing side of things. Actually, the modeling tends to go pretty quick. Animation takes long, and texturing, where you are wrapping an image onto an object, can be very tricky if there's any detail work. But in this case, it wasn't the case. Every single of these materials, so this material here in the top bit is going to be called, let me just select the top cube here, if I can click on it. There. This one here, boat upper. It just has a material applied to it that's called plastic_red. Like it's just one of my Unity materials, right here. It's just solid red. So there's no image, right? There's no texture in the albedo or anything like this. It's just a simple solid color with just the right amount of sort of metallicness and smoothness. Well, 0 metallicness, the 0.5 smoothness gives it a nice sort of plasticky kind of color over here, and looked fine. So I did that for some of the models, like my my little inner tube over here, or not inner tube, the sort of rescue tube. I don't know what you would call this. Life preserver. It's just a single model, but inside of Blender or Maya or whatever you decide to use, you can apply material indexes to various faces. And so our mesh renderer here has the materials is actually an array of 2. So it's a combination of plastic red, plastic white. So I didn't have to do any UV mapping. I didn't have to make images in Photoshop, that sort of thing. Now we do have a few textures. The buoy, for example, these buoys over here, I actually did do with a texture, although in hindsight, there was no reason for me to do that. Right? I could have done it with 2 pieces of plastic, and then probably should have, for an example. The loot power-ups, the cubes, do have textures, although they're just Unity cubes, and by default, the UV mapping for that is just the texture gets applied to every face, so that was really easy to do. So that, you know, there's a few things that you can do for that. That's not too bad. The bath mat's got a little bit of texturing as well. The shower, I don't know, another, what would you call this? Like the non-slip bath mat, but this is like the little towel at your feet when you come out of the tub. That and the shower curtain have some texturing obviously put in there. Weird, funny little visual glitch on this side. That's odd. I don't know if that's visible in the game or not. This is a last-minute addition, because we had a little bit of time, but I didn't want to break any systems. I didn't want to make any code changes near the end, because I didn't want to have to worry about debugging it. So one way we spent a little bit of time is by adding a little shower curtain here, just to add a few more details. There's also a toilet bowl here. It's not quite done, because in the game, oops, let's maximize on play. In the game, you actually can't see the rest of the toilet. The thing that's funny here, and it's a little Easter egg that almost no one will notice, but it was easy enough to do, and it made me kind of entertained. This helicopter that picks up your survivors actually drops them off in the toilet over here. So at any given point, you can come over here and you can see how many survivors you've rescued because they're just sitting in the toilet. It's not something that's really visible, but I like the idea of the helicopter picking up dudes, and then it was like, do I just like despawn them or what? And I had drawn the toilet at that point because I wanted a little something off screen so you could see stuff, right? So I did that, and I think someone in chat said, drop them in the toilet. I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. We'll do that. Like, it almost certainly will not be noticed by like 99% of the people who play the game, but it's a little entertaining. The ducky bath mat is probably going to be noticed a little bit more. The shower curtain actually doesn't get noticed that much because you really have to get down in the bottom left corner to see it. But yeah, the sponges here. The little break apart effect is something that you do. You don't really do that in Unity. I mean, the shower curtain's a little, wonky, but it still gets the point across, right? What was I saying? The break apart effect. Yeah, all that is substitution. So I have 2 versions of the sponge. I have the full sponge, and then I have the sponge that's like shattered, like that was modeled in Blender, basically. I mean, using one of the self-fracture tools in Blender just to make life a little easier. And when you break the sponge, you just replace the whole sponge with the busted up sponge. Ow, 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 ow. Yeah, so, I mean, so everything was simple that way, right? And then it allowed you to spend more time, I mean, making sure the look was cohesive. That was important. And also to make the gameplay elements as strong as possible. So I always say that, well, with everything in life, but in particular with something like programming and in a game jam like this, while it's helpful to know what you're good at, it is most important to know what you suck at, is what I often say. So I know my artistic limitations in particular, and so I make sure to design around that by only sticking to things that I'm quite comfortable at, and that makes a big difference for speed. Like, I know that texturing is time-consuming and that I'm probably not very good at it. I know that animation is time-consuming and that I'm not really good at it. I know what kind of art I can do a half-decent pass at. Like, these little dudes here, when you look up to them very close, they don't look very good. But in the game, from here, yeah, they look like little action figures, little dolls that are just floating in the water. It's perfectly fine. So, you sort of work around that. The other thing with game jams is you want to have, as much as possible, you want to have one mechanic and do it as well as possible. You don't want to go overcomplicated because, A, it'll take too long, but also there's a good chance that you will not be able to implement all of the mechanics very well. So focus on one. I mean, here, there's a couple things really, but it's like, we're steering around, we're shooting at some stuff, and we're carrying some stuff. That's it. Like, you know, the whole thing is we're just driving around in a bath, and there's a couple of interactions, very simple interactions with things that you can do in the bath ultimately. And then you get to work on the look and feel of the thing. You get to tune the mechanics a little bit for, you know, what's hard, what's too easy, you know, what feels awkward, and then work around that. Like, for example, by keeping a lot of the other mechanics simpler, we were able to think about, okay, well, you know what, we really do need this little hook mechanic, and then put that in there, and that's fine. And it all worked within the existing context. It was like, so what I developed is a decent system to make it look like things are floating in the water here. You know, everything's got this little bob. There's a lot of shared code there. Everything had a component called floating object. Oops. Floating object, which could be tuned to different levels of sort of bobbing around and things, but ultimately kept everything at the water level. So if things were higher up, they would fall down due to gravity. If they were below the water, they would actually bounce back up as a result of buoyancy. Big shots going on here. You know, so all the objects basically behave the same way. They had colliders, they had rigid bodies, and then once you have that in, it's like, okay, so now there's going to be a lot of friendly interaction between all of these things. And when you implement a new system, I need some sort of better way to fight this guy, ideally. Oh, I think I did kill him there, which is good, but there's still a lot of foes. Can I pop this? Ah, that's what I need, a bath bomb. Thank you. Good timing. Oh, there we go. I can pick up the survivor magnet here, which means I could use my claw for something else like this, because my people are being dragged. Hopefully we can get here. It lasts for 10 seconds. It's just barely enough to drag people there. If you get slowed down by any reason, the magnet will wear out by the time you get there. But at the same time, because it's just rigid bodies in physics, there's a good chance that the survivors here might have enough momentum attached to them that you can still drag them. And I did leave that guy behind because I forgot that I had someone hooked when I was trying to do some stuff. Let's try to kill this guy if we can. And that, and then if we can maybe... Oh, he didn't die. He's still not dead. Die. There we go. You'll notice that, like, there's the ammo meter over here, which regenerates. The reason for that is I don't have a cooldown on the shooting. You can shoot as fast as you can click. So there's two ways to handle your bullets, in my opinion, for these kinds of games. Either you have some sort of cooldown, so you can't just spam it. But the problem is if it's a hold, like if it's hold to click, then that's fine. Then you just fire as quickly as you can. But if it's a push to click, then it's like, sometimes when you push to click, you're not going to shoot, and that's kind of boring. And that was the thing, a lot of times is I would ask myself, like, is one of these mechanics boring? Unfun mechanics, oh, I'm going to get murdered here. Oof. Unfun mechanics need to be banished as quickly as possible. Clicking and then having your unit not shoot because you've clicked too soon is boring. Being able to fire as quickly as you can is fun, but you need to present abuse by having a slight ammo management. I didn't want real ammo. I didn't want you to, like, run out of ammo and then be screwed. Like, just wait a second to reload. It's mostly an anti-abuse mechanic, while still mostly being fun. And then you can counter some of the lack of fun by picking up, say, the auto fire, the bath bomb, that sort of thing. So the people who watch my stream heard me say that a lot. Like, this is not fun. Mechanic blank is not fun. It's not entertaining. One of the things, like pushing the people around with your boat, was kind of interesting. You could balance a game around doing that, and that's sort of what I was trying at first. You know, you could do this. You can do fun stuff like bop people with your boat if you get the speed right and really give them a good like sort of kick. And, you know, there's other ways to work it, but ultimately it proved to be more, I don't know, a little more tedious and a little less fun. It was more fun to sort of just hook people on a drive-by, and that was fine. People kept bringing up all sorts of balance things, like, oh, maybe every blank number of blanks, this thing should happen because it's harder. Well, random stuff is often not fun if it's unpredictable and it feels like you don't have control, right? So you want to ask yourself, is this thing fun or is this thing kind of boring? Is it a sort of artificial difficulty? This game is hard. You're going to die very, very quickly because a lot of stuff spawns in, but none of it is as a result of sort of boring mechanics that get in your way of the fun. You basically, you never stop moving. You just keep blowing up stuff, and it's very exciting, and there's threats all over. And you know, that's one of the biggest goals, is to find that fun aspect. What I always say with my Ludum Dare projects is I don't care if I necessarily win overall. I certainly don't care or look for winning the prize for or innovation, right? My games, I never look to make an innovative game. I mean, if it were to happen at some point, great. But that's not one of the things. I mean, I'm hoping that it doesn't, I don't want a game that looks like it's a direct copy of anything else, right? But nothing that's happening in this game is particularly special. It's not like I'm truly thinking outside the box. I'm not, as far as I know, copying any kind of game. But ultimately, each one of these mechanics is relatively simple and straightforward. But the idea is it going to be fun? Is it visually appealing? I mean, these are not like insanely beautiful artistic graphics done by someone who like can cause all these emotions to be felt by the player or anything like that. No, although I am quite pleased at what I feel is a very cohesive look for this game. Like, I feel like everything makes sense. I went out to make it feel like you're a kid playing with toys in a bathtub, and I think it feels like you're a kid playing with toys in a bathtub. And so I'm really pleased about that, right? But the one rating I care about is the fun rating when voting kicks in, which hasn't even started yet because it's all on a new website and they're still working out the details. Okay, let me tell you, auto fire spread shot. Oh, with the super cannon? With the super cannon! See, you want to find the fun? That's fun. Yeah. But yeah, the fun meter is the thing I care about. Like, I want people to play and enjoy the game. I always target games for Ludum Dare that can be, if not necessarily finished, literally, can be fully experienced in about 5 minutes. You know, maybe 10 minutes for a complete game, but I want you to be able to experience the fullness of the game in about 5 minutes, because people who are playing and judging don't tend to spend a lot of time on each game, because they're looking to judge quite a few games, and so they don't spend that much time on each one. So I want them to be able to spend 5 minutes on the game and get a full sensation of it. This one's actually a little bit shorter than that. You start off with 1 minute 30 on the timer, and it's quite an incredible run if you manage to survive for 5 minutes, because that means you have rescued a lot of oof, this is gonna be tough, of toys, not to mention maybe have gotten lucky with the pickups, for example. So it's not an easy thing to do. So most of your games will be shorter, although at least the people, you know, my own viewers, and of course that's always gonna, you know, your mileage will vary there. A lot of people have played quite a few games of this because of the difficulty aspect, there's a lot of temptation to play again and play better. This is not healthy. This is not healthy. I need to get out of his front. Okay, there's at least health, literally. But I need probably a power-up. Auto fire will do it. Auto fire is extremely potent. No, I'm out of time! Like, even I find this game to be very compelling, and I made it. I know how the mechanics work. Oh, I got the 11. And that might be a personal best for me, if I'm going to be perfectly honest here. Yeah. So the performance is pretty good. In fact, I discovered a bug in it with right near release, because it's so performant, in that because of one little thing I did with my steering, if you played the game without VSync turned on, which happens by default at certain quality levels, but even if you were to turn it off, so if I go to the quality level over here, and I'm playing on fantastic quality, and let's say I turn off VSync, this is on by default at fantastic quality, it's off at the fastest quality. But if I go and hit this, even at fantastic quality, I should get, so I'm getting, 700 frames per second over here. So the game is very performant, despite the fact that I haven't really done a lot of, well, any effort to optimize, both in terms of code, but also in the visuals. You know, there's a lot of extra draw calls. There's some batching that happens, but you know, there's a fair number of draw calls and things like that, and the objects stay around at the bottom. You know, we don't make any efforts to clean that up. I do turn off all their physics and stuff when they're at the bottom, so there's a little bit of that, but ultimately there's not a whole lot, but it's still very performant because there's not that much going on, really. And what we're doing is well within the bounds of what can scale quite well in Unity and can scale quite well in the physics system. A lot of shared materials, not that many mesh colliders, and what mesh colliders we do have are properly set to convex and have been simplified and things like that. Anyway, the fact that it's so performant and does hundreds of frames per second, and when it doesn't have the VSync on, meant that we had actually discovered a bug in our turning code because of the way it was interacting anyway. It meant that if you were running at really high FPS, you could hardly turn, but I was able to just correct that easy. It was a very, very simple thing to do. So I guess that would have been in player controls over here. So we can talk about some of the code over here. There's a lot of code files. Now, most of them are quite small and single purpose, which is what you want to do in programming as much as possible. You want to avoid any piece of code that tries to do too much whenever possible. Sometimes something like a game manager file can sometimes start to do a lot, but in this case I definitely avoided that. And usually it's like it does a lot, but each function basically just does one thing. I would say if you ever have a function that is sort of larger than one screenful, and I mean it's a little deceptive here because I zoom in for the purpose of making videos, right? Like our update over here is, you know, it's not even quite a screenful, and that's with a lot of white space over here. If ever you get a function that's bigger than one screen, you can't see it all at once, it's often going to be a good idea to see if you can break something down, like turn some of your substeps into other functions, right? And then it sort of figures it out. But like here's the entirety of our player controls. And really, other than the save materials and restore material, which is used by our invulnerability thing that turns us golden, other than that, all of it just happens here. But anyway, it was yeah, it was this code right over here with the facing. I think we were doing something like, I think we were taking our current rotation, transform.rotation, and multiplying it by how much we wanted to turn, and then storing it in facing. The idea that the player controls code finds out what the player wants to do by reading, you know, WASD and reading the mouse controls and that sort of thing, but would just pass that information to floating object, which was responsible for actually affecting the changes to the object's position in the physics and things like that. And yeah, anyway, because update does not run at the same time as fixed update, right? It was possible that update would run many, many, many times between fixed update. Fixed update is the thing that actually affects the physics system, and by default it runs once every 50 seconds, or sorry, 50 times per second. Okay, the physics system by default in Unity runs at 50 FPS, and it's completely unlocked from the visual system in Unity, which can run at, well, hundreds of frames per second. So this was running at hundreds of frames per second, and it was updating this facing thing, but the facing was actually, this was only actually doing something every 50th, so a lot of those changes to rotation are being thrown away. Anyways, just a silly little thing, which was very easy to fix once it was pointed out. But it was only pointed out very close to release because I put out a build and tell people, okay, start playing it. And someone said, well, I can't steer. I'm like, what? And then I figured out that, oh, they're probably playing on the fastest setting, which has no VSync, and this math was slightly wrong. So made that adjustment. So floating object is the thing that handles the physics. And what it does is it takes in, for your player or for the monster's AI, it's got this facing value, and it's got this acceleration value, right? Yeah, acceleration over here. So either the player's controls or the monster's AI, so that would be, what do we call? Enemy chaser over here. So either one of them sets the facing and the acceleration, and a floating object is responsible for applying that to the actual rigid body to make things move. But in addition to that, it handles the buoyancy and things like that. So we have a value in here for water level. It tries to maintain its Y of 0 by default, a Y level of 0. If you're below the water level, if your Y is below this water level, then it actually applies an upward force to represent buoyancy. You float because you're full of air. Whereas otherwise, if you're either you're on the surface. This is a little check to see if we're within the surface. If you're at the surface, we set quite a high drag just to make the physics feel about right for the game. And if you're not on the surface, so if you're not below the surface and you're not on the surface, then you're above. So what we do is we turn off all the drag so that the objects fall properly. This drag manipulation plus this upwards force made the objects feel like they were in the water, because the water felt like it had resistance, and the water is also making them float. But then when they weren't in those situations, we just turned off the drag and things fell normally, as if they were, you know, just falling through the air or something like that. And then, you know, the acceleration force. There's this bobbing effect over here, where I have right, every frame, this is just a vector 2 or something, every frame I add a little bit to the X and Y. That gets run through a sine, so it alternates. Ultimately, this little component alternates from -1 to +1, gets multiplied by a bob intensity, which represents how many degrees. So when this resolves to a 1 or -1, bob intensity, which I think is something like 20 for the player, for example, which means your ship can bob up to 20 degrees on one side or on the other, front and back over here. Although I bob in one direction at a different rate. This affects the speed at which it happens than the other. That way they're not in sync, so they're not just moving diagonally all the time. Anyway, this gives you that nice, if we load this up here, the reason it looks like the ship is on the water is just that. That's just the bob adding a little bit of random rotation in different angles, and it looks like it's waves in the water. Also, you notice that there's like that little shine of water down here that's moving. So the water surface is, oh, I got a power up. Right, all the stronger enemies, they always drop a power up. Notice that you can push your boat around. I'm not using the arrow keys. I'm just pushing my boat around using the explosions of the shots in the water, which is very fun. Yeah, this water surface, all I do is I gave it a slight normal map. So what is that called? Is this called water? Water, right over here. So it's just got a material on it, this water material, which has a slight normal map, like a bump map, basically, that I just made in Photoshop. I think I just used the cloud filter, so it's, I guess we could find out. It's, yeah, it's a cloud. This texture over here. So I've got that, and so that affects the normals, which means the light shines on it in a slightly different way, and it has a script on it, this water script, and all it does is it offsets the texture over time. It just moves the texture a little bit so that it makes it look like there's just the barest hint of water. It's subtle. Oh, you can see it a little bit more over here. It's subtle, and it turns out that that's sufficient to give just a little bit of sense. I would have loved to do a full custom shader for the water. I mean, with like diffraction and stuff like that, that would look really nice, although might be out of place in this game. This is just enough to make it feel like, yeah, you're on water. And also, anything that's a floating object leaves a wake effect behind as it moves. So, I mean, the dudes you drag behind, yourself, the enemies, if I hadn't shot that duck, like you see this torpedo goes ahead and leaves these wake effects. Everything is leaving these sort of wake effects over here as it moves, so it gives you a little bit more sense of the water. The wake is literally just a semi-transparent circle. That's literally what it is. I got a script on it to make the wake, that object, so everything that moves will spawn the semi-transparent circle. And the semi-transparent circle prefab, which I think is just called Wake over here. Wake and Wake Bigger for a couple of different sizes. Has a script on it called Wake, which all it does, by the way, all the source code is available for download. It's not an open source project. You can't technically take the code and necessarily make your own game with it, but it is available for you to read through. And yeah, all it does is the object grows over time and becomes slightly more transparent over time. And then after a certain amount of time, when it hits its max lifespan, it just deletes itself. It's at that point presumably gone to fully transparent and then disappears. That's it. It just, yeah, that's it. So as we move, we spawn objects. Those objects grow and become more transparent. It gives you just, it's subtle, but it's just enough to give you a bit of a sense of motion. You know, just like when things fall, they sink to the bottom. They leave a few bubbles behind, and just the lightest little bubble sound, it proves to be just sufficient. A little ding there when you drop off a passenger, just it lets you confirm that you've dropped them off in the proper area. That when you hear the ding, you know that you have put them somewhere, right? And that you can turn around and you can continue doing something else. There you go. See, there's the ding. And your rope automatically releases as well at the same time, which is kind of a nice thing. But it's ideal. You want to have these slight little audio cues I mean, maybe even a visual cue. We had considered the idea of having, and I say we because, you know, chat's involved in everything, and the idea of putting a little flare. When you rescue your person, they like fire off a flare or something like that. But I don't think that proved to be necessary. I don't think it would have actually added anything to the next level. And while, I mean, you know, there's plenty of immersion breaking stuff, you know, like little explosion symbols and things like that, I think the flare would have proven more out of place than some of these other things. I think the stuff we have is like just enough to sort of believe, like, you know, kids' imagination is imagining that you're firing these cannonballs and whatnot. And I think the flare would have been a little weird. I guess the quacking is a little ridiculous with the fireballs, but that was also the point. Like, the quacking was supposed to look dumb and be a little over the top, which is exactly what happened there. So it's like, why would a kid have this kind of like demonic duck, and why would it shoot fireballs? Mostly because I thought it was going to be funny, is what it came out with. And we wanted some sort of boss. And we'd made a bunch of quacking jokes throughout the weekend, and it just seemed like, you know what? This is the way, this is how it's going to be. Ooh. Bam. Bath bomb. The lavender bath bomb is how I called it. So I'm nearly dead again here. But yeah, it's compelling enough that I want to keep playing instead of talking. What else we got? We got, you know, some niceties, like if you hit escape, you get a pause menu. You can turn the sound system off and on, or if you still want sound effects but no music, you can toggle that off. Exit, restart, that's in there. You know, it's got the pause function. When you die, it's got the restart. We do have a little bit of a tutorial. I mean, that screen doesn't look particularly good. But yeah, I mean, it's weird because, like, and I think this was part of why it was successful. Nothing I did in this game was hard. It was all well within the rounds of my programming skills. As usual, I had a little bit of issues early on. Actually, one of the first things we did on like the first night, like an hour in, making this boat. I made the boat model, and then I wanted to get it to bob back and forth. And of course, I screwed up the quaternion math because it's me, and that's the way it's going to be. You know, that was, in a sense, that was one of the hardest things. Working out a couple things for the power-ups, like, oh, how am I going to get the power-ups to work the way that I want? Was slightly more advanced programming, but still relatively simple, and again, well within my wheel well. Each one of the objects here, so all of these loot power-ups, first of all, they're just a cube. A regular cube, and rather, because I wanted to save myself some work, I didn't want to have to create materials for each one of these power-ups and then have to maintain that. Instead, each one of these objects, these power-ups, have a loot bubble component over here, which takes a texture in that slot. And then at runtime, so if I were to just drop one of these into the scene over here, it's just an untextured cube. But as soon as you run the game, the texture from that gets applied to the material. So it meant that I didn't have to create a bunch of material prefabs. I could just slide into here. There is a single loot bubble script over here, which is actually an abstract class. I mean, I didn't have to go through the trouble of marking this abstract because I just realized I'm terribly sorry. I've been recording all this, and this view is actually being cropped. I hope that has not been a problem. And is it actually centered correctly? It's not being centered correctly. Jesus. I'm not going to re-record this because I'm like 37 minutes into this. Damn. I did not realize that my OBS was all skewed. And actually, it's still not right because the screen size wasn't set right. Oh, I can't re-record this. Not coming off of Ludum Dare, I have like no voice energy, so I can't redo this again. And I don't remember all the things I've talked about, and I'll get confused. Oh, I hope it's okay. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so this loot bubble class, I didn't actually have to mark it as abstract, you know, because it's just Ludum Dare, and speed is the thing, right? It's not necessarily about like following. You want to do a relatively decent job with your naming and your structuring and organizing so you don't get too lost, but you don't necessarily have to. Anyway, so you can't instantiate this loot bubble class by itself. But what it does is it handles when a collision happens, it calls this give loot thing, and then it blows itself up. Plays a sound effect. It calls give loot and then destroys itself. Give loot is an abstract function, so instead you have specific instances. So do I want to start with the most complicated one? Well, let's start with the simple one, actually. Health regen over here. So this is just subclassed from loot bubble, and all you have to do is you have to override the abstract function of give loot. So when you pick up the health regen item, it just finds the player, heals you for 1, And that's it. Very, very simple. The most complicated one is the invulnerability one. And there's two reasons for that. One, well, the actual function of it is really easy. It sets an invulnerability timer over here. The health class checks to see if invulnerability timer is above 0, in which case it ignores any damage that you receive. Meanwhile, in its update, it decreases the invulnerability timer. So at some point, it'll hit 0 again. The complicated bit is we want to change the texture of the player to be golden. We want to make it clear when you're invulnerable. Most of the effects are quite, obvious. Like when you get the spread shot, well, then your bullets are spread shot, Your cannon upgrade, the magnet is, it's fine. People will get sucked to you. Like there's sort of a visual effect going on here. Homing bullets were not implemented, by the way. There's sort of visual effect. So for invulnerability, I mean, you couldn't just not take damage. That wasn't good enough. So I decided to color you golden. And so what happens with this is we have an invulnerable material here, which is the golden color. And when you pick up the component, it sets the invulnerability timer. But then it goes through, finds the player, and finds every single mesh renderer on that player. Finds a list of all of them. But some of these mesh renderers might have more than one material index. In fact, again, that life preserver does. So for each material... For each mesh renderer, we have to go through all of its materials and assign each one of those material indexes to the invulnerable mat and assign all that. And then the tricky bit is we have to remove that afterwards. So what I did is I created a system. So on my game manager, you can register an update action. Update action is just a list of action. Action is a short form for a delegate. It's the same as saying something like delegate, delegate. I'm trying to remember the syntax. Void, this is an action, this? I think that's the correct thing. So you could just do that. Basically what this means is update action expects to be a list of functions that take no parameters and return nothing. Okay? So you can create any function and add it to that. So for example, you can do something like if we had a function, and we've done this before, so some function like this, right? I could say update actions dot add some function. This would be legal. Okay, so you're just registering it, and later on you can call it. Now I could have used events and all kinds of different things, and should I have for this? Probably. I probably could have just used an event system, but anyway, that's neither here or there. So anyway, we've got that. So what I can do in my invulnerability is I just created this anonymous function. Like I could have created a function over here, stop invuln or whatever, but because of reasons, I just created this anonymous function. I labeled it A, right? This action A. I fill it in. Here's the code for the function, and I just added it to that. By doing it this way, like calling it ahead of time, what this thing's job is every frame. So these update actions get called every frame. And this thing, every frame, it checks to see if you've stopped being invulnerable. If you're no longer invulnerable, then it tells the player to restore its original materials, and then it removes itself from the list of update actions. So it's the most complicated one. Yeah, I should have used the event thing, but I don't know. For some reason, it never comes to mind. I don't know why. Because I think mostly because I'm used to working with the idea of actions and anonymous functions and lambdas and things like that, and plenty of actions and in plenty of languages, but they don't actually have an explicit event syntax. So I'm never thinking of an event syntax. I'm always thinking of just making an array or a list of functions. That's just what comes to mind for me, which is why I never think of using the event keyword in C#. Event keyword in C# is not magic. The only thing it is, it's a weird like semi-public, semi-protected version of an object. An event, if you register one, so if you make, where's here? So I could have this be public event, and then update actions E, right? I think that's all the syntax. I don't remember. I must have forgotten something. I guess I would have had to divide and delegate. Anyway, let's ignore that. Go away. Okay. It means you can add or remove things to this list from outside, but you can only run these things from inside of this. And I mean, it's a subtle little distinction that doesn't actually matter for what I'm trying to do here. Yeah, but that was it. There was a couple of the others of these that may, and I don't remember, that may have used that action thing. I think there was one. Oh, probably Survivor Magnet? Yeah, the survivor magnet. So the survivor magnet, all the code that pulls people in is actually part of this action mechanic. Instead, I could have done something else. I could have had the player script have this logic for sucking people in when your timer is set above 0 or something like that. But just like we did with the health, right? But anyway, 6.5 doesn't either. So we got power-ups. So if you want to know how to, you can make power-ups, you can look at this for different ideas. I don't know. The enemy AI is super simple. So there's two variants. There's the enemy chaser, which is this code here. This script's job is very simple. It finds the player. It turns towards it at a certain rate. We have a turning speed over here. So this tries to turn towards the player. And then it moves forward at a certain speed. That's it. So we are trying to turn towards the player. And then we're trying to accelerate in that direction. We're setting the facing and we're setting acceleration. Again, the floating object code is responsible for actually moving everything in my tub. But the enemy chaser code decides what the correct facing should be and decides what the correct acceleration shall be, and then passes that information to the floating object. Then there's the enemy shooter here, and this is only responsible for finding out if the player is in front of this object. So if the direction towards the player, the difference, vector3.angle checks the difference between, say, our forward axis and some direction, returns a number of degrees difference. If that's below our firing arc, then we shoot. We're not aiming at the player. We're just saying if the player is roughly in front of us, then we're going to fire forward. So this is used by the submarine, both variants of the submarine. The normal sub, which just shoots a torpedo that goes straight forward, and the super sub, which shoots a torpedo which is heat-seeking. It is also used by the Kraken, which fires a pair of torpedoes. Well, they're torpedoes, but they're skinned like fireballs. But they're exactly the same as torpedoes in every single way. The shooter code does not move the creature at all, which means everything that shoots, so your submarines and the Kraken, also has the enemy chaser. They both try to turn towards and move towards the player. And then some things also have the enemy shooter code on there to make some difference. The hook, so the rescue rope is the thing that you shoot out. So with this, if you click the right fire button, then it finds out where you are firing to by doing a ray cast against mouse. Ray cast target is just a plane in the world that we use as a target for our mouse clicks. What we do is we ray cast to there. We find out if there's anything near there. We go through all the floating objects in the game. This is not optimized. We check every floating object in the game and see if they're close to where we clicked within a certain radius. If so, then we flag that as our captured object. And yeah, if we don't have anything captured, then all we do is we reel in the rope at a certain rate, and that's it. If we do have something captured, then what we do is we apply a little bit of physics to that object to bring them in. So yeah, if the captured item is not equal null, then we check to see if for some reason our range is extended. If we've gotten too far away from our target, or if our target got pulled away from us because it happened to be attached, I don't know, the helicopter or something like that, then we cancel it. But otherwise, we just apply a little bit of force to the object at the end of our rope to pull it towards the direction of our boat. We actually have the force be strongest when the object is far away and get weakened as the object is progressively closer to our boat. Just felt better. But that's it. That's that rope that you throw out. It's very easy to do. The player Canon script is over here, where all we do is we basically check to see if every frame we check to see where the mouse is, because we want our cannon to rotate to face where our mouse is. And then we check to see if the player can fire and has chosen to fire. And if so, what we do is we spawn a bullet. We spawn the appropriate bullet depending on what mode we're in. And then we do that. So this is where we decide. This is the normal cannonball prefab. If we're in big bullet time, if we picked up the super cannon upgrade, then instead we use the big cannonball as our prefab. We spawn that prefab and send it forward. If our spread shot timer is greater than 0, so if we've got the spread shot power up, then we're going to shoot 2 extra times, each time angled offset by 10 degrees. So 10 degrees negative, 10 degrees positive, and we fire 2 extra cannonballs. That's it. And we got some UI stuff. We got a lot of little scripts to just clean things up. Like this is the self-explode. Well, that's the sponge. That's how it like spreads itself apart a little bit. But like destroy self, I like a lot. This is a piece of code that deletes an object after a certain amount of time. Now you can, whenever you want to destroy something, you can use destroy game object and pass a certain amount of time, like 5 seconds. I don't tend to use this because instead I tend to have like a lifespan that counts down, and then when the lifespan is 0. Then I destroy the object. And the reason I do this is because we can do things like check to see if the game's supposed to be paused. and then not destroy things. Whereas otherwise, if you use destroy with a timer, then if you pause your game through your own logic because you've got, you know, the main menu open or something like that, the stuff in the background, the destroy timer is still going to run and expire the object. And then also we get to do stuff like I have code in here to fade an object out. If there's a fade timer over here, for example, then what will happen is, so like you can have lifespan of 5 seconds, fade out time of 2. If in that situation, so the object will destroy itself after 5 seconds, but when this timer hits 2 seconds or less, then it will start to become more and more and more transparent and fade out more visually. So you get to do little things like that. So that's it. I got my music manager over here, which is not particularly sophisticated. It just plays a song and you can pause it or restart it. I do have a sound manager class I've used before, audio manager over here. There's a reason I have this in here. The reason I have this is because if you want to play a sound effect in Unity, it's kind of sort of annoying to do a one-shot sound effect. It's fine. So if an object has an audio clip attached to it, which is really good for objects that make sound continuously, or an object that only have one sound effect they'll ever do, and you want to play one. So it's very easy to do something like audio clip AC, or sorry, audio source AS is, oh, right, as is a keyword. So source is equal to get component audio source, and you use something like source.play. Right, so your audio source, this is a component that's attached to an object that has a linked audio clip, so that will play that clip. You can choose to change what the clip is to something else and then play that, but you're playing one thing from that one object, and it's kind of awkward. There is a convenient way using the static call on audio source called play clip at point, so you can play any sound clip here arbitrarily, but it needs an object and it will always play as a 3D sound. So if you get closer or further away from the object, the volume ends up changing. And for a sound effect, like you've just picked up a power-up, doo-doo-doo-doo, it's just supposed to play in a 2D way. It's just supposed to play directly to speakers. It doesn't make sense to have a 3D location in the world. But there's no variant of play clip. There's no, for some reason, there's not a static play clip, you know, that's 2D. Basically, you know, play clip 2D that just plays globally. And I don't know why there's not. But with audio manager like this, I can call audio manager dot play clip. There's just a 2D version where it'll play some clip in here. And what it does is it calls this static function. And what we do is we instantiate an object that has a audio source on it. I assign the clip, I click play, and this object that I instantiated has one of those destroy cells. So after it's done playing the clip, that object blows itself up. This would be a good candidate for object pooling, because creating and then destroying these game objects over and over and over, especially in the case where you've got a lot of sound effects playing, so you're instantiating a lot of these and then destroying a lot of these, can lead to a lot of garbage collection and can slow down your game. So object pooling can get away with that. It can get around that, but turned out we didn't really need it in this game. But there's plenty of ways to keep optimizing it. Anyway, I don't know. I think that's about it. Oh, the survivor randomizer. So what's a cool thing about our survivors is there's only one. Survivor. Right here. Survivor 01. So there's only one survivor over here. Okay? But I have the survivor randomizer script, which takes in hair colors, skin colors, and shirt colors over here. And what happens is when you spawn the survivor, it randomly, this survivor is actually a single object. No, I'm wrong. It actually has two objects because it has the life preserver, but it has this is just called cube here, but this is the survivor's entire model. And again, it was meant to just look fine from the top, and it does. Okay, so my script, I point it to that cube, basically the survivor's whole body, and this cube has a material with, or a mesh renderer with 3 materials on it. One is for the head and hands, one is for the shirt and pants, I suppose, and one is for the hair color. And so what I can do here is I just randomize. So the shirt 01 in the materials is for the shirt, so I just choose one at random. and then I choose a random skin color, and I choose a random hair color, and that means that, in fact, I have 5, 15, 30 different possible variants of survivors over here. So if I take this guy, and I double him, and I duplicate him, and I duplicate him, and let's duplicate him again, and we hit play, they will then all look different. So you get a little bit of variety in what you've got going on over here. So there, I did it this way. I could have also used, and I did at first, use something like random.color. This will pick a random color for you. But it didn't really look good, because a lot of times it was sort of just muddled, kind of taupey gray stuff, which was no good. It was a lot better to just define a series of colors and then have it pick from there. I mean, obviously the skin and hair color, you wouldn't want a fully random one anyway, but even for the shirt, it didn't look quite right. So I just took a lot of really bright, dominant colors as the shirt color and put them in there. So yeah, then you get a variety of survivors. They don't look the same, but very, 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 very easy to do. And again, you can see these are just floating objects, right? The survivors are just floating objects, which have a collider and a rigid body, and that's literally it. That's as sophisticated as these guys are, but it means that they bob around in the water, right? And you can grab them, and, you know, they've got physics. If you can push them around. You can push them into each other. You can just drop a little cannonball next to them in the water and have it send them away, which feels very satisfying. So yeah, that's it. I think that's pretty much all to talk about. Again, you can follow the link down below to play the game. It's available on Windows, Mac, Linux. There's also a WebGL version if you want to play in your browser. And the source files are available over there. And you can poke around and see how I did things. Again, this was all written very quickly, 48 hours, I mean, minus sleep. So I figure I got about 32 hours-ish of work in this, so I had to work very fast. And, you know, so there's not much in the way of comments, right? Most of the comments are like things I've commented out, mostly. But, you know, keep upright. There you go. So there you go. That's how we work things out. And yeah, and I want to say thank you to everyone who watched this weekend. It was a lot of fun, very satisfied. Voting has not started yet, and voting normally lasts for 3 weeks. I will let you guys know when I know how the game did. But the important thing is I feel extremely satisfied with this. I feel like I had a lot of fun making it. I think that the game is cool to look at. I think it's very fun to play. And, I mean, what more can you ask for, really? Thanks for watching. See you next time.